Incroyable. Le Sénat américain demande une enquête criminelle sur Goldman-Sachs. Oui, je l'ai regardé. J'étais stupéfait. Goldman-Sachs, une banque si prestigieuse qui influence les financiers du monde entier.
The once untouchable financial firm is now on the receiving end of a subpoena from the Manhattan DA's office. The subpoena seeks information related to the recent report by the U.S. Senate on the firm's dealings before and after and during the financial crisis.
C'est l'énorme rapport du Sénat américain accusant Goldman Sachs qui a déclenché l'enquête du procureur. Ils sont 35 000 dans 32 pays à travailler pour Goldman Sachs. Et leur siège est ici, à New York, et j'étais impatient de voir à quoi cela ressemblait. Pas un nom, pas une plaque, pas un signe, comme une société secrète. Les employés et même les anciens sont tenus au secret. Officiellement, Goldman Sachs est une banque d'affaires. Mais quel genre d'affaires? Depuis 2008, une foule d'articles de journaux accuse cette banque de s'être enrichie pendant la crise qu'elle a contribué à fabriquer. On les accuse aussi de trahir leurs clients et de manipuler le prix de tout ce qui se négocie sur la planète. Qu'y a-t-il de vrai dans ces accusations? À qui peuvent-elles profiter? Cette banque est-elle réellement plus puissante que les gouvernements? Il y a aussi de nombreux livres qui décrivent comment en 30 ans, la banque a acquis cet immense pouvoir. Voici ceux que nous allons rencontrer. Ils sont sénateurs, écrivains, financiers, journalistes, banquiers et ont eu l'amabilité de nous éclairer. J'ai écrit au président de Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Banfield, pour obtenir un entretien. En attendant sa réponse, je lis Business Insider, un site sur Internet. Au moins 2 fois par semaine, ils écrivent des articles sur Goldman Sachs. L'une des journalistes est Katya Wachtelia, elle vient d'Australie. Je n'ai vu qu'une petite photo d'elle, mais cela devrait suffire pour la reconnaître. C'est gênant pour elle d'être filmée au bureau et nous allons dans un petit restaurant. J'espère que ça ne sera pas trop bruyant.
How many articles did you write?
50 to 100 articles about Goldman Sachs, and I update them constantly, so it could be more than that, but I think it's about that many. They're the bank that everybody wants to know about. They're the bank that everybody wants to read about. So
How come?
I think it's because they're the best at the moment, although that's also up for debate. But over the past decade, at least, they have been the #1 bank. And I think that when you're #1, people are interested. There's something about the power. It's sexier. So the man on the street can't understand why Goldman would sell a product and then hedge against it. But if you're in the banking world, if you're in finance, it's totally normal. Just because something is, we feel ethically wrong, or we can't understand why anyone could do that, doesn't mean that within that industry, amongst the people who know, it's common, it's what they do. Goldman Sachs is certainly guilty of something, but I don't believe for a second that they're more guilty than other banks. I think that they're a scapegoat often, and that annoys me because I think that people don't delve into the activities of other banks as much. I think people are less willing to look at the activities of other executives or employees of those banks, and I think it's there's a reason Goldman's looked at. I just think that a lot of the time it's unfair. And if you went to the back offices of those other banks, it would look really ugly too. There's always a gap, I think, between moral and legal. And I think that that's something that the government and prosecutors are constantly trying to chase. And they're going to create a new law and they'll create new regulation. The banks are smart. The bankers are incredibly intelligent. They come from the best schools in the country. They know what they're doing. They'll get around it.
Tu as eu des nouvelles de Goldman?
Oui, le service de presse de Goldman vient d'appeler. Pas de rendez-vous avec le président, ni avec personne d'autre.
La première chose que l'on apprend lorsqu'on commence à travailler chez Goldman Sachs, c'est qu'on ne parle pas de Goldman Sachs. Je poursuis l'enquête avec John Cassidya, un journaliste du New Yorker qui suit l'activité de Wall Street depuis 20 ans. John Cassidya compare le secteur financier au monstre que Frankenstein avait fabriqué et qui lui avait échappé. Je lui ai demandé de m'expliquer ce qu'il avait appris en observant les banques d'affaires comme Goldman Sachs.
Well, it turns out banks weren't banks, were they? I mean, that's what we've discovered. You're thinking of a bank as somewhere where you put your money on deposit and they give you a low return, perhaps 1%, perhaps 2%. You go back at the end of a couple of years, you take the money out. That's what banks were for 200 years. The banks you're talking about today are not banks in that sense at all. They're largely sort of speculative machines. They take the money that you put in there, but that's only part of what they've got. They also raise money on their own behalf. They issue their own bonds to scale up their investments, and then they invest in all sorts of things. Banks also now gamble, i.e. speculate, on their own account. They've turned into what are called investment banks, Wall Street banks. So the big French banks, for example, the big German banks, they have a subsidiary inside them, which to all intents and purposes is just the same as Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley. It's a Wall Street investment bank stuck inside what is supposed to be an old-fashioned retail bank. People are particularly fascinated by Goldman because they're widely seen to be the sort of quintessential Wall Street firm. For 10, 20 years they've been seen as the number one firm. They hire the smartest people. They make the biggest profits, highest returns on equity, as they say on Wall Street. And they also have this incredible record of producing people who go on to higher office. They're very close to people in government, not just in the US, but in the UK and other parts of the world. So Goldman Sachs for 10 or 20 years has been a source of envy to other people in the financial industry. And also invariably, they get involved in whatever the big story of the day is. Whenever there's a big blow-up, you look around, Goldman, not always, but usually is involved some way or another.
Depuis 80 ans, derrière chaque grande crise financière, on trouve toujours Goldman Sachs. Déjà en 1929, Goldman Sachs était à l'origine du krach boursier. Même Groucho Marx y avait perdu toutes ses économies. Aujourd'hui, Goldman stocke des milliers de tonnes d'aluminium et de zinc pour en faire monter les prix. Et d'après le Wall Street Journal, Goldman Sachs conseille à ses clients de parier sur l'écroulement financier de l'Europe. Tu as des nouvelles?
Oui, le service de presse de Goldman nous conseille de rencontrer Charles Ellisiä. Il a écrit un livre sur Goldman.
Charles Ellisiä est un stratège de la finance et un grand admirateur de Goldman Sachs avec qui il collabore depuis très longtemps. C'est le seul qui a accepté de défendre Goldman Sachs. Il a insisté pour le recevoir au club des anciens de l'université de Yale. Sa femme est vice-présidente de cette université. C'est un genre de vieil hôtel avec une immense bibliothèque et un buffet délicieux.
How come you love them so much?
I have a great deal of respect for the people. I've worked with them personally for nearly 40 years as a consultant. And when you're in a consulting work, as I was in, you meet with the people away from the clients, backstage, or back in the kitchen, where real truth gets told. And over and over and over again, I watched how they made decisions about things that they really had to do well, and how beautifully they built up a fabulously talented, wonderfully capable organization. Do I think they've always been perfect? Certainly not. Do I think they have made small mistakes? Almost every day. Do I think they've made big mistakes? Yes. Almost every 25 years they make another huge mistake. Are they really a terrific organization? Even so, yes. And would I be proud to have one of my children working there? Yes. And would I like it if I had gone to work there? Yes, I'd be very proud. It's amazing if you go back 10 years ago and you were to say anything negative about Goldman Sachs, people would shake their heads and say, you must be crazy. Everything about Goldman Sachs is just wonderful. Today, if you say anything good about Goldman Sachs, they shake their heads and say, you must be crazy. I thought everything about Goldman Sachs was terrible. It's the same firm. Modest changes in size, yes. Some interesting changes in the business activities they do, yes. Some changes in some of the key people, of course. But is it basically the same firm? Absolutely.